A reading from the book of Philippians. Hear what God's Spirit is saying to you. Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Keep on doing the things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, and the God of peace will be with you. I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at last you have revived your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned for me, but had no opportunity to show it. Not that I am referring to being in need, for I have learned to be content with whatever I have. I know what it is to have little. I know what it is to have plenty. In any and all circumstances, I have learned the secret of being well-fed and of going hungry, of having plenty and of being in need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Here ends the reading of words that give us insight on God. May God grant to us wisdom and courage for interpretation.
So how many of you like superheroes? So, there are some superhero fans out here. I'm glad to hear that because I love superheroes, and I am especially grateful to be living in a time where it's okay to like superheroes. Superheroes are in the mainstream. What was once relegated to children and nerddom has now come into mainstream popular culture. In fact, if you look over the past 20 years, the vast majority of the movies that have grossed over $1 billion at the worldwide box office have been superhero movies. We largely have the Marvel Cinematic Universe to thank for that, but many superhero movies have become popular. I think in part it is because instead of Greco-Roman mythology or the various other forms of mythology through the years, we now have superheroes to help us make sense of the world in which we live in. They are a commentary on humanity, what is both good and bad about humanity, and they help us to make sense of a chaotic world. I don't think it's terribly surprising that superheroes began to really gain popularity in a post-9/11 world as people were trying to make sense of a world that felt dangerous and violent, which is the same kind of world that gave rise to the creation of superheroes in the first place. The first superheroes really began to appear in the late 30s, early 40s, during the midst of the Depression, and as we were being drawn into a worldwide war, right? World War II. And so I think people wanted a story, especially in those early days, where good overcame evil, where there was a clear right and wrong, and where we saw victory happening and we saw good reigning, which is why the first superhero really was Superman. Someone who has a clear sense of right and wrong, a clear moral duty. And for a long time, he was the poster boy for DC Comics. The face of the modern superhero was Superman. But it didn't take long for Batman's popularity to surpass Superman. We got the 1960s TV show that was full of color and camp. And then in 1989, the Batman movie, which was a worldwide phenomenon. Perhaps some of you remember that. I was 4 years old when it came out, so I don't remember the worldwide phenomenon, but it is to say that that did shape my childhood, and that 1989 Batman movie continues to be my favorite movie. I'm not saying it's the best movie ever made, I'm just saying it's my favorite movie. And when I was 7, Batman the Animated Series came out, and that's still the best Batman adaptation. And so I am to say that Batman permeated my childhood. It helped me make sense of the world. And for the past almost 35 years, Batman has been a part of the motion picture system, and we have gotten a ton of Batman movies. So there's something about Batman's story that our culture is a bit obsessed with. Now, Michael Keaton's Batman has been on hiatus for 30 years, but is making a comeback next week in the Flash movie. So I thought, I want to talk about the theology of Batman. Now, even if you aren't a huge Batman fan or you haven't watched any of the Batman movies, I bet you know Batman's story. You know that Bruce Wayne had parents, Thomas and Martha Wayne. They were wealthy citizens of Gotham City. DC Comics uses fictional cities, so Gotham City. And they take their son to a movie. And because of the desperate poverty, there is a robber, Joe Chill, who in a robbery gone wrong ends up murdering Thomas and Martha Wayne. This leaves Bruce Wayne orphaned, only to be raised by his butler, Alfred. He doesn't deal with that trauma. Instead, the grief consumes him, and the anger consumes him until he reaches an age when he can go off. And he travels the world learning every form of martial arts that he can. He's also a genius, and he studies science and math and mechanics and history and becomes the world's greatest detective and travels back to Gotham City to fight crime, to try and alleviate all of the crime in Gotham City, and he's going to do it with his fists. He goes out to fight crime, but quickly discovers that they're not afraid of him. Despite all of his knowledge and power, he's not feared. And so he thinks to the creature that he fears the most, a bat, because of a traumatic childhood experience with a bat. And he dons that persona, putting on a bat mask to go out and fight crime. And the criminals are, at least initially, terrified of him. He has a tenuous relationship with the police force. His only real friend is Commissioner Jim Gordon. Sometimes he's closer to him than others, but for the most part, he is a vigilante who answers to no one. Batman. You know the story of Batman. You know, any good telling of the Batman story wrestles with two questions about this character. One, which is the true identity of the person? Is it Batman or is it Bruce Wayne? And at least in most recent tellings, it is Batman who is the true persona, and Bruce Wayne is the mask that he puts on. The carefree billionaire who goes out as a playboy in the world, that's not really him. The real person is the one who is consumed with rage. The other question that they have to ask, really, is, does Batman make things better or worse for people? Is Batman a blessing or a curse to Gotham City? You know, it's a story that starts with an act of desperation, a murder of two people because someone is hungry. And by the end of Batman's story, there are clowns and penguins. There are people who are causing violence for the sake of causing violence, whose whole identity seemed to be wrapped up in their relationship to Batman. Batman was directly involved in many of their creation. So is Gotham City better or worse off with Batman? You know, I think Batman is consumed with rage. I think he never dealt with his trauma, and it has affected his life to the point that one of the things he cries out most often is, "I am vengeance, I am the night, I am Batman." I always liked the thought of Batman when I was growing up. I think because I thought, well, anybody could be Batman. You know, as long as you're a billionaire and a genius and know a ton of martial arts, anybody could be Batman. He doesn't have any superpowers. Anybody could theoretically be Batman. And I liked that about him. But the more I've thought about this, the more I have wondered if both Bruce Wayne and Gotham City might be better off if, instead of going out in the night and beating criminals to a bloody pulp, if Bruce Wayne dealt with his trauma and his rage. And as cool as it is to spend billions of dollars on the Batmobile and gizmos and gadgets, I wondered what would happen if he took those billions of dollars and invested in the infrastructure of Gotham City, the poverty that exists in Gotham City that ultimately caused Joe Chill to kill his parents in the first place. What if he was no longer a billionaire, but instead was investing in the people and the services of Gotham City? And I have to think that Gotham City, while not as much fun to watch, for sure, would likely be a whole lot better off. And so would Bruce Wayne. Because Bruce Wayne is not content, he's not satisfied, and he certainly is not happy. He is living in service to his own rage and his thirst for vengeance. You know, there are two main teachings of Jesus that have kept me in the church all this time. There are a lot of times where I've felt like I've really resonated with the saying from Gandhi, where he said, "I like your Christ, I do not like your Christians. They're so unlike your Christ." You heard that one? That a lot of times I think the church isn't really great at following the teachings of Jesus. And so two teachings of Jesus have really kept me grounded and wanting to stay in the church. The first is that we should be so filled with the love of God, so consumed by God's love, that we not only love those who are our friends and family, not only them, not only our neighbors, but even our enemies. I love that we are to love even our enemies. And the second thing is that we should practice forgiveness over and over again. And the reason I like those two things is because they're a little bit counterintuitive, both because they're things that aren't easy to do and we might not want to do them, but also because they seem like they are external, like they're about other people. And they're not. They're about the internal. They're about us. You see, if we don't love our enemies, we hate them. And hate consumes our souls. The same is true if we hold on to bitterness and resentment. That doesn't hurt anybody else but us. And I think that's one of the reasons why Jesus told us over and over again that we ought to forgive as much as we can. Because if we are able to forgive, if we are able to deal with things and let go of them, then it helps our souls. I'm not saying that we forgive without consequences. I'm not saying that we don't set boundaries. I'm not saying that all things are forgivable. But what I am saying is that Jesus told us that we ought to forgive because he realized that we were the ones who paid the price if we didn't. It's the same if we don't love. If we hold on to hate, it eats us up inside. This passage from Philippians really spoke to me today, in part because it's about love, in part because it's about forgiveness, and in part because this phrase, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me," is often used in terrible vacation Bible school curriculum when you're talking about superheroes. So a lot of times you'll get vacation Bible school curriculum where Jesus is the ultimate superhero, right? Superman can fly, but Jesus can walk on water. Superman can shoot laser beams from his eyes, but Jesus can turn water into wine. He's a great superhero. And if you follow Jesus, then you're a superhero too, can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now, I hope this isn't going to come as too much of a surprise, but that's not really what Paul was talking about when he was writing this letter to the Philippians. He loved the church at Philippi. He loved the folks in Philippi. And he is writing this letter to them while sitting in a jail cell, uncertain about his future. You see, Paul was unique in that he was a Judean who was also a Roman citizen. And Paul was arrested because of his participation in the Christian movement, founding these churches, which was illegal. And so he was arrested, and it became pretty clear that he was probably going to be put to death. And so he writes this letter to the church in Philippi kind of as a prayer. He's sitting there in the jail cell, uncertain about what his life is going to be like, asking himself, was it worth it? Was it worth it? And he writes these words, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You know, Paul also was wrong about a lot of things. And one of the things that he was the most wrong about was an imminent eschatology. You ever heard of that? An imminent eschatology? So eschatology means end times, like the apocalypse, and imminent means now, like right away. So Paul thought the world was going to end right away. He thought the world was going to end in his lifetime, and he told everyone that. He said, don't rock the boat too much. Stay in your social space. Don't get too bent out of shape because the world's going to end. Jesus is coming for you. It's going to be okay. He was wrong about that, right? Or else we wouldn't be here now. He was wrong about all that. And towards the end of his life, he begins to realize it. And you can see it in his writing. The way he writes changes, and the way he begins to talk about things changes as it becomes clear that Jesus is not coming back in his lifetime. Was it worth it, he wonders. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You know, it strikes me that a lot of us really would like a superhero to come along and save the day whenever things get out of hand, whenever there is evil in the world. Or it strikes me that a lot of Christians might really want Jesus to return and to set everything right, but I don't think either one of those things is going to happen. Instead, I think Paul missed one of the fundamental teachings of Jesus' message, which was that we are to be his hands and feet in the world. We shouldn't wait for him to come back and set everything right because we should be a part of setting things right in the here and now. That is why we pray each and every week in the Lord's Prayer for the kingdom to come on earth as it is in heaven. And we commit to being a part of making that happen. That is what that prayer is about. That is what we are committing to do. You see, we're not waiting for someone to come and save the day. We are to be a part of the saving of the day. We are supposed to be a part of what God is doing in the world. So you see, I think the theology that we learn from Batman is not to be like Batman. Much as I love Batman, I think that what we learn is to try to love, to try to forgive, and to try to be at work in the world, making it a better, more peaceful, more just place where everyone has enough, so that the kind of violence that we see permeate that story is eradicated from our world. That's the kind of world that God dreams of and the kind of world that God calls us to create. So may we get to work creating that kind of world. May it be so, and thanks be to God. Amen.